There is a diagnosis which has symptoms that we in the GTR method believe are often caused by traumatization, and it's called the adjustment disorder. The adjustment disorder is viewed as a person's difficulty to cope with something very stressful that happened to them. And this stressful thing that happened to them does not necessarily have to be the threat of death, injury, or sexual assault. It can be something else as well. And it's often viewed as a normal type of reaction that these people are having to what is going on in their life, just more intense compared to what is the usual case. So, for example, they can become depressed or start having anxiety, or their academic and work performance can suffer. They can feel generally overwhelmed, or they can start behaving in ways that they have never behaved in before, often violating their own moral norms, being unfaithful to their spouse, or indulging in substance abuse, lying, manipulating, more so than would be their norm. Like I said, this one diagnosis is relatively similar to how we view traumatic symptoms in the GTR method, in that they can be a response to a one-off event or ongoing stress, and that this stressful event doesn't have to be that death, injury, or sexual assault. In fact, in this diagnosis, the stressor can range from marital or financial problems to health issues that either the patient or someone else can have, losing their job or their business, or different kinds of interpersonal conflict. All right, let's look at traumatic stress. Many of us assume that because we don't have any full-blown symptoms of PTSD, we are trauma-free. But trauma is often not blatantly visible. Many of us don't even realize that the way we feel is not quite the norm, and that what we feel are the consequences of trauma. If our life has exposed us to continuous and ongoing periods of stress, that makes us more vulnerable to trauma and hence traumatic symptoms. There are those who don't like drawing parallels between trauma and stress, but speaking from practical experience, the symptoms can be very similar. Also, one thing to know about symptoms of trauma is that they don't necessarily show up right after a traumatic event. There's a certain amount of stress that our system can take. In other words, to a point, you are fine. But as soon as a critical mass is reached, it is that proverbial last drop of even a small stressor that can unleash traumatic symptoms, even from many years ago. Everyone is prone to trauma. And this goes even for trauma that is a consequence of little traumatic events, little stresses that stack upon one another over time. To say it differently, trauma can be a result of a cumulative effect of minor distressing events that, when stacked upon one another, create trauma. So these little stresses create a huge distress that, when it reaches a certain critical mass, has the same effect on us as a traumatic event that was maybe very, very intense. In my coaching experience, trauma includes all of these cases when people say something like, ever since that happened, I'm not quite the same. Or when it's the cumulative effect of several little traumas or several stresses, then they're more likely to say, ever since I was in my early 30s, I'm just not the same person. Or I don't know when this happened, but I'm not who I used to be. And what they mean is that they feel less joyful, less resourceful, less energized, less optimistic or enthusiastic about life and their future overall. What many people conclude here is that they're getting older, and that feeling this way is most probably just a natural part of aging or the daily stresses of life. Now, here's my philosophy when it comes to scenarios like these. I believe that while with the passage of time, a vast majority of people will start to feel like things are not what they used to be, it is not the effect of an aging body, but rather the effect of trauma resulting from traumatic stress. Science has found a long time ago that our brain suffers from several biases, and one of them is the so-called negativity bias. The negativity bias means that a negative experience will have a stronger impact on the human psyche than a positive experience. A bad experience gets detected and processed by the brain faster than a good one. In other words, our mind has a tendency to dedicate more attention, more of its resources to negative events as opposed to positive events. And that means not only paying more attention to negative things as they happen, but also connecting them with more emotional intensity and thus remembering them way better than positive events. Actually, even our language contains more negative emotion words than positive emotion words. Of course, all of this makes sense. Your brain knows that whenever it encodes something as at least slightly traumatizing, you're sure to remember it and avoid that dangerous situation in the future. This is how your brain is trying to protect you. But in its attempt to protect you, it also loses the ability to see the good, the safe, the fun, the meaningful. In this training, you'll be introduced to several important tools designed to de-traumatize the brain and to allow a natural recalibration of a person's well-being. All right, that was all I wanted to share with you in this lecture. I hope all made sense to you, and I'll be looking forward to connecting with you again soon. Thank you for your attention, and bye for now.